Thank you for joining me here on Sew Stitch Hex. Today, we're going to be talking about option paralysis and the issues that it can create in the craft. So, option paralysis is essentially when you have so many options, like with me. I have so many books. I have over, just books, not counting comic books, I have over 1,200 books. That's a lot. I've read about 30% of them. And I've read parts of other ones, but if it's like an encyclopedia or a large spell book, I don't count that as read. Certain grimoires I won't count as read if it's just spell work, because I'll reference back to them, and they don't feel like a book. Like if it's an instruction manual, that's different than if it's a recipe book. You're not going to consider a recipe book read the same as you would a novel, and so that can impact the amount of books that I've read. But that brings up the other issue of, what do I read? Like, new witches have this problem of option paralysis. What do we study? Do you start with like the Contrix, if I'm saying it right? Or do you start with like a pop culture astrology, kind of sextrology? That's a great book, it's super fun. Or do you start with like studying your daily horoscope and horoscopes of the people close to you to see how it correlates like with a generic algorithm versus like reality? Is it incorporating your sun, moon, and rising? Is it incorporating all the other houses and stuff? Or is it just like the basics? You're a Capricorn, so this is happening. Like, because some people can't be most people can't just be boiled down to one category. I feel like I represent Capricorns pretty well, but I mean, I have some issues with a couple things that are done. And when you mix in my other like alignments, it does fix that. But personally, like, that's just me. And the more you study, the more differences you'll see. With option paralysis, it's just hard to know where to start. You start with the original, this is the first thing there. This is hard reading, or it's difficult language because it's language we're not used to. In other instances, it's highly influenced by the culture and the location from which the person who wrote it comes from. Just like this might mention herbs and spices that are very specific to a different culture than your own, and you're like, I don't know what to do with that. You can learn from it, but you're not going to use it. So you just get confused on where to start, because there's so many variables in each and every aspect of the craft that you can choose. Having taken astrology, maybe you couldn't decide between astrology and herbs. Now, how are you going to study that? I personally love to watch medicinal herb videos. I'll link one of my favorites in the description below. But watching videos from actual teachers, I'll study actual medicine and various books. You don't just start with something like herbs and go at it from the ground running. You can really get someone sick or actually kill someone if you don't know what you're doing, because you don't know what kind of allergies somebody has. You don't know what kind of allergies you might have that you're not aware of. So if you're making tinctures, or if you're making lotions or various other things, you can cause an allergic reaction with someone if you haven't studied each and every herb, and if you don't understand the reactions between the herbs. So that can be a real issue when you're starting out. Option paralysis, when you start something, it can just be so overwhelming, and it can make it so difficult, where do I start? And this can be seen a lot in the practice of the craft. So I like to point out, it's witchcraft. You are crafting your path. You are making things. You are doing things. You are a practitioner. A practice. You have to do it. It takes work, physical movement, involvement. I get it, if you can't go outside, you have problems with mobility. Okay, but there are little things you can do to yourself. Because if you're not just practicing, it comes up to the fact of, are you a practitioner? If you're not practicing, you're not a practitioner. That's just how it is. You have to call it like you see it. If you call yourself a witchcraft practitioner, but you're not doing anything, you're just reading, you're just learning, yes, it's great. You do want to be informed. You do want to educate yourself. But you can't just stop at reading. And with option paralysis, I feel like it creates this demon that just eats at everyone. Because you think, once you decide on something, pick one field of study. And if you don't pick one field of study, you have so many more problems. Because then you're like, oh, I look at everything, which I do. I look at everything, which makes it so hard. Because then you just have to pick one and hit the ground running. But it's really difficult. It's not that easy. especially if you have an interest in everything and love theology and just general religion as much as I do. You can't just pick one and just go. You have to look at everything. When it comes to, like in this instance, you pick one thing. You've picked astrology. So now you're reading and you're studying in this route, but then you have to figure out, how do you practice? How do you do it in your everyday life? Because don't have to do it every day. Like, you can do it once a week. You don't have to overexert yourself in the craft. You don't have to feel like you're pushing more than you can, because you'll burn yourself out. But you still have to do something, because if you don't do anything, then how can you call yourself a practitioner? So like with option paralysis, there is the process of overexerting yourself and giving yourself more than you can chew. And I feel like we should think about this and like structure it. I've tried to make a weekly structure, and I have different days where I do different things. Papa Legba gets Monday, and then throughout the week I work on different things. Wednesday I work on cleaning, and I work a little with Hestia. I do really like Aphrodite and other aspects of love on Friday. On Saturday I work a bit with Hecate, and just generally like, this is a new week. This is where I'm starting. This is how it goes. Monday is like my official, like, this is a new week. So like I work with Papa Legba. Like Saturday is, and plus it's his day. But Saturday is just a general like, reset, you know? Plus that's the end of my work week, so like that's important for me to like do something on that day. And I set the same time across the board and work from there. And each day I try to read a new article, and I try to coordinate some activities that go along with the general day. So like, structure yourself, but don't over structure yourself. I started with setting up like a meditation time, a study time, and a workbook time for every day for at least 30 minutes each. And like, yes, it doesn't sound like a lot, but that's like way a lot for me. And I realized very quickly that I was not going to keep up anything if I kept going at that pace, because I would just stop and need like a break. So you just have to pace yourself. In some ways, option paralysis can lead us to like a dilemma that I brought up in one of my videos on toxic spirituality, which I'll link below. So when you were reading, I find it important to look at both sides of a situation, because if you're only looking at things that agree with you, you're always going to be right. But you should always give yourself the opposite opinion and the opposite choice. Like, don't just read articles, like if you're into politics, don't just read liberal articles, also read Republican articles. You should really mix it up. You don't have to agree, but you should see what the other side has to say. You should really balance what you're saying. Look at third parties. See what they have to say. Really inform yourself on the general political scope. I'm not really into politics, but I still read a little bit and try to keep up as best I can. But the idea here is to keep yourself balanced, because if you're just too extreme, you're not going to see the bigger picture. Just as you should read everything, even if it's like complete garbage, you should still be able to read it so that you can give a review of the fundamental reasons why it is complete garbage. Like, if you read a book and it has just bad reviews because it's really poor, and you just say, oh, well, I don't like that book because no one else does. Well, why? Give a real reason. Like, read it. Is it fundamentally misogynistic? Does it have poor grammar? Is it lacking creativity? What is the true problem with this book? And that's what I like to get at with some books. Like, I'll point out, like, this book is so popular because it's like the basis for the craft, but it says the same thing as all the other books. There's nothing really original about it. And it's like, why would I care? And yes, I get that different authors are supposed to have the different perspectives, even though you don't always see it. I feel like you should not just read one thing. Like, you're reading Wiccan books and you only read Wiccan books. That's cool, and I get you're Wiccan, but why not explore a little farther, understand a little bit more about other practices and other crafts, so that you have a more educated portfolio to understand where everyone else is coming from, and to understand more about yours, knowing that there is that Abrahamic tradition in Wicca, and like where it comes from, and being able to understand the connection overall. And I find that to be really important. But this can bring up problems that we've had with being classically conditioned to have an aversion to something. And you can like decondition yourself, which is to reform or reverse previously conditioned behavior. Typically, you see it with treatment of phobias and other anxiety disorders to help someone change the fear response to a certain stimuli and get it brought under control. But this can also be seen in unlearning. So in unlearning, you're taking and discarding previously learned information that needs to be reformed. It needs to be corrected because some of the ideas are rigid or outdated info. You can see this with teachers taking outdated forms of teaching methods and just like doing away with them and starting with something fresh that can actually get students involved and actually help a more variety of students with different learning capabilities and like different ways that they process information. I find this really important with like trying to have a conversation with people of different paths, is bringing up this idea of different opinions, of bringing up different paths and different practices, because whereas one person might see the athame as fire, someone else might see it as air, and it's important to know why they think that. Maybe it's personal associations, which is fine, but you've got to ask why. Maybe it's because of where they learned the practice or who they learned the practice from or what culture they generally brought all of the pieces from. And studying from different books and from different authors and perspectives can help you broaden the general spectrum from which you're learning. It can also help you overcome different biases that you have. How does this relate to option paralysis? I feel that taking it as in a structured way that I do, I typically, and you sometimes see it in the structure of my books that I do reviews on, I'll do one on hoodoo and then one on something more demonic or Satanist, and I may not review the books, but I'll read the books. So it'll go from more of a Christian to a Satanist, which they're very similar, of course, but they're like different focus. And that helps me. Or I'll go from like Wiccan to like Taoist, and it's like, okay. And it just feels different. Like I try to jump back and forth from a more European to a more Eastern if I can, or for the lighter aspects of the religion to the darker aspects of the religion, depending on your viewpoint. And going back and forth between these can really help you widen like your understanding of your own practice, but can also give you better ideas of ways to expand your practice. And by structuring yourself going like one and then the opposite, it can make it easier to boil down your option paralysis and push you forward. Having these options like available can be overwhelming. So can incorporating practice into your practice. So educate yourself, but realize that you still need to incorporate physical work and ceremonies or rituals into your everyday. Even if it's something as simple as a meditation with a candle or mixing herbs in your kitchen for your tea. I do that. That's really lovely. Or it could be something as simple as a ritual for cleaning and setting up for that, because that is just a simple way to incorporate it into your daily life. And you can even go so far as to add different herbs or oils into the cleaning solutions, provided they're not going to react. If you're using a natural solution and you're doing it correctly, you're fine, but like do your research, of course. But like remembering to incorporate what you read and what you learn into your everyday life. Try it on. Because maybe you're studying all this stuff and you don't think, like, you think it's just for you. But then you practice it and you realize that you really don't like how it feels. And you either need to adjust what you're doing so that it does feel right, or try something different. But if you don't give yourself the options, you don't give yourself that trial and that error and that actual physical in the moment, you're not going to know. So what I say here is try things, I don't know, and actually push to incorporate them into your daily life so that the option paralysis isn't so overwhelming. Like the options are there, but you have a structure to counteract those, like the need to not do anything because there's too much to do. In the comments below, tell me what you think about like option paralysis. Do you have way too much on your plate that you really want to do but just haven't done? How do you feel? And do you feel that incorporating practice is important, as I do? Like, what do you do? Do you do simple things, or do you only ever do elaborate rituals? How do you feel about it? Do you prefer simple one-person rituals, or do you prefer group rituals? Let me know in the comments below. Like And if you could all do me a favor, if you have not hit subscribe, please do. And if you can, share this video or your favorite video of mine and comment anything you want in the comments to say, hey, I love this video. I'm really trying to get my reach out there, so it'd mean a lot. All right, bye.